Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Cath Track. Thank you for subscribing, liking, and sharing this with your friends. Today's episode is with our friend Paul Paynter. Paul was born in Bristol, England. He's married to his amazing wife, Claudia, for 32 years this year. They have two grown children that they're extremely proud of. Besides his loved ones, Paul is extremely passionate about getting the messaging out about the great things that are going on in Western Canada. I couldn't agree more. Personally, he loves to make a tangible contribution and securing his family's future while enjoying travel, golf, skiing, investing, mentoring, and above all, spending time with his loved ones, family, and friends. Friends, you'll find his full bio attached. Paul, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Delighted to be with you.
I'm delighted you're here too. I've always enjoyed our conversations. I look forward to hearing what you have to say. Are you ready for the questions we sent you?
You bet, and likewise.
Excellent. Okay. Why do you do what you do, my friend?
Well, you know what? I was giving this some thought, and I think in a nutshell, I mean, we change as we go through our careers, right? And probably, when we're in our 20s, it's all about sort of making a mark and getting ahead and all this kind of stuff. And yeah, that's still important. We've still got to go out and we've still got to make a living. But I think, as we go on in our careers, we want to be sort of looking at things a little bit more in the round, giving back a little bit more, helping people that are at a earlier stage in their careers, doing some of the wider good things. So I think sort of distilling that down a little bit, Catherine, into my own situation. I mean, I came to Canada just over 15 years ago, had a great 15 years in Calgary and Alberta. Still very, very passionate about the city, about the province, and also its core industries, frankly, particularly perhaps oil and gas and natural resources that I've been involved with and gotten more involved with actually during those 15 years. There's so many great things that the city and province have done, so many great things that the industry has done. It's become a lot more challenging for the industry, as we all know, over the last few years on a whole bunch of fronts: economic, social license, call it what you will, access to markets, all of these things. But there's a really, really good core there. Calgary would not be what it is. Alberta would not be what it is. Indeed, Canada would not be what it is, I think, without, or certainly not to the same degree, without a lot of the great people and the great technologies that have come forward. And I think that message doesn't always get out there. And I think both the technology that I'm directly involved with now, which is General Energy Recovery Inc., or GERI, but also other things that I've been involved with previously and also am involved with in other roles. There's just so much that's great there. And a large part of it is, even within Canada, let alone Canada, we just haven't really got that messaging out. So I suppose to answer your question, it really is, the passion is about, it's not about that I've got a better technology or I'm smarter than anyone else. No, far from it. There's far smarter people in the room. But if I can help communicate what we're doing, what I'm doing, then, and help get that messaging across to help the economy of Calgary, Canada, Alberta, then I'm very much about that.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for your service always. Excellent. How exciting. And your top 3 things that you want to share today?
Well, I think there's, again, I gave this a little bit of thought. And I think part of it links into what I was just saying. There's a lot of great technologies and a lot of great companies, and a great load of great people around the world. This is not to say that we can't learn from other people. Of course, we can learn from other people throughout our lives and in lots of different ways. And I'd be the last to say that there aren't, technologies or trends or whatever that we shouldn't look at. But that doesn't mean to say that we should overlook just how much we have here in Western Canada. And I suppose I'm particularly looking at Calgary and Alberta in this context. There's just so many resources that Calgary's got. I mean, you look at all the range of oil production and gas production, right from the tightest of fields, and there's a whole bunch of them, like the Duvernay, the Cardium, the Viking, the Shaunavon, the Bakken, right through to the heavy oil crudes around Lloyd, right through to your oil sands, which is not just mining, but obviously in situ, SAGD, and whatever. There's so much experience there and so many new technologies that have really come out of that repository of expertise and people and finance and everything that has been centered here. So there's a hell of a lot of that. But that expertise, that finance, that whole ecosystem, for want of a better phrase, lends itself incredibly well, not just to oil and gas and exporting that ability and that skills and that knowledge around the world. And there's a lot of Calgary companies can do that. But having those resources and having those people and having that expertise makes Calgary and Alberta and Saskatchewan and adjacent provinces incredibly well positioned for a lot of these new things like geothermal, like lithium, because there's so much focus on car batteries going forward. Seeing, a load of car manufacturers are now just saying they're just going to produce electric cars going forward within like 10 years or something. So, you know what? Calgary and, well, particularly Alberta, Saskatchewan, incredibly well positioned in terms of lithium to be able to do that. Very well positioned for geothermal. And big buzzword now is hydrogen. We have the resources and we have the skill sets, but it's kind of adjacent to what we do. So my first point really, in a nutshell, is let's not underestimate just how much we've got locally in our backyard on people, on resources. We're very blessed to have the resources we've got, not just the traditional ones, but the new ones too. And of course, that expertise and that whole ecosystem of finance and everything around it to make it happen. So I think that's my point number one. Let's not sell ourselves short, right? Then I suppose the second thing would be, and it's kind of related in a way, is I think we've got to diversify from strength. You know what? There's been a lot of talk for a lot of years in the city of Calgary. I used to be with Calgary Economic Development, as you'll recall, within Alberta. Hell of a lot of chat about, oh, well, we can't just rely on oil and gas. We've got to go off and we've got to, we've got to become a Silicon Valley North, or we've got to become, big center for this, that, or the other. And I think there is truth in that. You can't just rely on one industry, and nor should we. But I think the diversity comes through strength. I mean, there's strength through diversity, but there's also diversity through strength, Catherine. And I think, in a nutshell, what does that mean? I think for me, what that means, and this was my sort of belief when I was at Calgary Economic Development and in other roles, is that you don't kill the goose that lays the golden eggs. You don't say, hey, oil and gas, that's just so last week, last year, last century, whatever, out with it, in with the new. Because it is the oil and gas, it is the natural resources that really has generated all that human capital, financial capital, and early adopters, frankly, in terms of the companies looking to adopt these new technologies. It's all of those that really have created the need for a financial industry, for a logistics industry, for clean tech, for environmental technologies. So that's my second point. It's kind of like, it's not a zero-sum game. It's not like we get rid of oil and gas and then, hey ho, we're off to this great new Shangri-La of whatever it is. Yes, there's the potential to diversify, but we should be utilizing our strengths. And I think we also have to recognize as well, I'll pause for breath in a minute, but we need to recognize, Catherine, and everybody, in my view, that, we Calgary, Alberta, it's a long way from most of the centers of population. It's pretty cold for 6 weeks of the year. I know, there's Chinooks and everything. That's great. And Calgary's had a benign winter and all of that. And that's great. But you know what? You can't be all things to all people. I don't think it's realistic to think that you are overnight going to substitute an industry like oil and gas and fill all of those well-paying jobs and everything else with, whatever it is. Yes, there is that opportunity, but if we can diversify from strength and graft other things on, then so much the better. I think the other third and final point, and I won't take too long over this, is let's use the opportunities we've got. I mean, heck, I've been involved with the World Petroleum Council Canada, as I think you probably know. I'm on that board. There's some great people on that board. We spent a lot of time and a lot of effort here in Canada, but particularly reaching out to the rest of the world, bidding against 4 other major cities to win the World Petroleum Congress 2023 for Calgary, and therefore for Alberta and Canada. And it's kind of slipped off a lot of people's radar, I think. But you know what? This is one of the biggest events, the biggest probably event in oil and gas that happens every 3 years. It's in Houston at the end of this year. That's been delayed by a year because of coronavirus, but that actually is a great springboard for us in many ways. But the Calgary event will be in September 2023. Why did I get involved in that, Catherine? The reason I got involved with that, because with all the stuff that's happened over the last 5 to 6 years in terms of disinvestment from oil and gas, particularly with international oil and gas companies, with all the trouble with oil prices, with all the trouble with market access, with pipelines, and all the rest of it. And on top of all of that, the horrendous year that we've all endured with coronavirus and what that did to oil prices and people's jobs and their general mental health and all of that stuff, I felt that, and still feel, here is an opportunity to get a lot of the world's top execs from the likes of BP, Shell, Equinor, ConocoPhillips, ExxonMobil, and all the national oil companies who maybe might have to some degree written off Alberta or Calgary or the oil sands or even all the other fields that we've got, which aren't oil sands, and the gas and the hydrogen and all the rest of it. Get them back into Calgary, getting them having meetings, because that kind of naturally follows, these collisions happen, and then hopefully good things would happen. So that's why I got involved with that. That's why I still remain involved with that. I'm not involved with it too much on a day-to-day basis. Colleagues such as Denny Panshort and Richard Masson, are heavily involved with that and doing a great job. But you know what? That's the third thing. Take advantage of what we got. We got a lot of great stuff. And it's not just that. We got fabulous events, that people want to come to, which we can also utilize for business. And we do, things like the Shore Charity Classic, Stampede, the skiing. Someone mentioned that. We don't utilize the Winter Star World Cup downhill at Lake Louise enough, but let's do all of that stuff. Let's really use what we got to. Sorry, it's a long speech, but hopefully.
No, I love it. I love it. You're so passionate. I have no idea why you don't live here still.
Well, let me just address that one quickly, because yes, I am now living in British Columbia. I'm living on Vancouver Island, and you know what? It was a very difficult year last year. I won't beat around the bush here. I was very happy to be living in Calgary and Alberta, but I changed roles at precisely the wrong time. I was with the Saskatchewan Research Council for a very good 6 years and still got fond memories, and ironically, still working with them. We were actually, GERI, the company I'm working with, General Energy Recovery Inc., we were actually on a Canadian Heavy Oil Association seminar or presentation at lunchtime yesterday with over 250 people registered, and proud to be working with Saskatchewan Research Council again. They're a great organization, very proud to have been with them. But you know what? Everyone sometimes needs to move on, but I just chose the wrong time to move on, frankly, and I moved on February last year, and I joined an energy efficiency company specializing in programs for corporates and NGOs and governments, headquartered out of the US. And of course, coronavirus came along, and the last thing, frankly, that was on people's minds at that time was energy efficiency. So I was with them for a grand total of about 2 months, and then really looking about at what would happen. And so we had to sort of think from a personal, familial point of view of what we were going to do. And we came to the decision, and I suppose time always tells whether it's right or wrong, is that we would sell up where we were living, and we would at least temporarily move over to Vancouver Island to really sit out the virus, do some stuff online and see where it left. And I don't know, not all of this was planned out, Catherine, but I ended up doing some stuff, gig economy stuff last year. I worked with a media company out of Lower Mainland called Crownsman Partners, recruiting people for their new Crownsman Energy show I worked on. But more latterly, from December, I've been working pretty well full-time with GERI. And you know what? That's the irony of actually one of the ironies of the pandemic is that, and you know this, and lots of people like this, I'm sure, would agree, is that I could never have dreamed of doing business development from here for a Calgary oilfield services company before the pandemic, doing it from here.
No.
But of course, it doesn't matter now in a way. I mean, it matters for some things. I mean, obviously, if you're going out of well sites or whatever, it matters. And maybe this whole sort of ecosystem, I hope it does come back, of meetings at the Petroleum Club and all this kind of thing. But I have been able to do it from here, and probably quite grateful for that.
I'm very happy for you. Excellent pivoting. And what about the new frontier or good news story that you want to share?
Good news, new frontier story. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about, forgive me, I'm going to talk shop just slightly with.
You can talk shop. This is your show.
Well, thank you very much. So GERI, or General Energy Recovery Inc. This is not a new company. This is a company that I worked with actually at a distance with when I was at Saskatchewan Research Council for a number of years, but it's a Calgary headquartered company, although the funders are mainly out of Europe and the board are out of Europe, but the operations and the management and what it's doing is predominantly in Alberta and Saskatchewan. It has operational presence in Lloydminster, but it's headquartered in Calgary. Okay, I happen to be on Vancouver Island, but that's not really relevant in this regard. I mean, heck, when the pandemic's over, I shall still be coming to Calgary, right? So, and my colleagues are there. So, what does this technology do? In essence, it promises a potential to increase the recovery of heavy oil, the sort of heavy oil, getting very moderately technical, sort of like 14 degree, 16 degree API level around Lloydminster. Oil that's typically produced by a process called CHOPS, or cold heavy oil production with sand. There's a number of operators there, both sides of the Alberta-Saskatchewan border. Typically, the original oil in place in those formations, only about 5 to 7% of the average oil is recovered from a particular well. So there's a huge opportunity cost there. There's a lot of well abandonment liabilities. If you can increase the length of the period that oil's produced and do that effectively and efficiently, but crucially with less CO2 emissions and less water and other thermal methods, then that's interesting to operators. True too of the oil sands. I mean, predominantly in the oil sands, you've got methods like SAGD, steam-assisted gravity drainage, and CSS, cyclic steam stimulation, and various big operators from the Suncors, Cenovus, Imperials, MEGs, all of these CNRLs. These companies have all, to a greater or lesser degree, used SAGD. I mean, some of them are mining as well, but the deeper formations in the oil sands are using in situ technologies. Challenges with those technologies is, they're capital intensive. You've got to spend hundreds of millions of dollars before you produce a single barrel. You've got to create your steam generator, which is big, once through steam generators as they're called. That does generate a lot of steam, but it also generates a lot of CO2 in the generation of that steam. Sometimes some formations technologies higher steam oil ratios than others, but it is energy intensive. There's no doubt about it. And you can also get to a stage, a little bit like the CHOPS wells with heavy oil, where you get to a certain point, they're probably recovering a lot more of the higher percentage of the oil in place in the oil sands versus the CHOPS wells. But you still get to a point of diminishing marginal returns. Well, what does GERI do? GERI basically has a different technology, which is based on what's called direct contact steam generation. So rather than once through steam generation, where basically you're boiling lots of water, and to basically create steam to sort of push down hole. The difference with direct contact steam generation is effectively you are, with the proprietary tool technology that GERI has got, you are combusting air, and you're combusting that with non-condensable, you're combusting air methane effectively. And then out of that, you are getting steam, but you're also getting nitrogen and carbon dioxide. And so you are basically injecting that into the formation to recover that extra incremental oil. But some of the benefits, without getting too technical, is the chemical process itself creates more water. So effectively, you're getting free water. But another big benefit of it is you're also sequestering the carbon dioxide. So you're using the CO2 to push out more oil, but then you're also storing that CO2 as well. And that environmental element obviously has been and is becoming increasingly important to operators, as much as, and in some cases even more than, that incremental oil there recovering.
It's a game changer.
Potentially, yes. I mean, and as I say, GERI's been around a while. I've been aware of it for a long time. I've only been directly working for and with them since beginning of December. But I think fair to say that we've already increased the profile of the company, further. I mean, not that it was starting from a zero base, but working through a lot of different channels and with really good people like the Canadian Heavy Oil Association. And this event we did yesterday, I want to give a huge shout out to Carolyn Bennett, who you may well know, who is with GLJ Petroleum Consultants, Brian Stock, who's also heavily involved with CHOA and with Suncor, the day job is Suncor. And also my colleagues at former colleagues at Saskatchewan Research Council, who also presented, as did my colleagues Brian Kay and Stella Zhang from GERI. So I mean, it kind of comes back a little bit to my point at the start about the breadth of the breadth of expertise that there is in Western Canada and in Calgary and the oil industry in particular. There's just so much talent there, and half of it actually it's actually the awareness piece, and my role really, and what I'm passionate about here, is getting that messaging out. I mean, there are far smarter people, as I say, than me in the room, but and I would not say this so much about our particular company or technology, but I think one of the challenges Canada has is, and I'm sure you'd agree, but I mean, by the way, you do a fantastic job yourself at getting that messaging out and not hiding behind a hedge or whatever, which we have challenges, I think, in Canada sometimes of just saying, well, actually, we're really good at this, and we aren't as, maybe it's because I come from the UK. Maybe we just have to be more boom, 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 particularly, I don't know, I've left the UK 15 years ago, but it's certainly true of the UK now. Post-Brexit, it's got to take every advantage it can get. But I think historically, perhaps it's more in the psyche to sort of get out and be a little pushy, not too pushy, but
I think it's just celebrating how amazing we are, and we deserve it. Everybody else does it in the world, so should we.
You said it, and you know what? I think we're getting there.
We are.
I think we're getting there. I get a bit dismayed occasionally, at the number of brickbats that we get from around the world. But you know what?
No, we need to keep our nose clean and keep focused. And absolutely. You know what, Paul, you do that every day. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's been great, Catherine, anytime. And it's been a joy and a privilege, and I've really appreciated this opportunity to chat today.
I'm delighted. I'm so glad you could join. And all the best to Claudia and your family. I look forward to seeing you very soon.
You bet. I'll probably be back in Calgary sort of end of April, early May. Got a few things to do, so hope we can catch up.
You have my number.
You bet.
Thank you, Paul. Everyone, Paul Paynter. I can't wait for him to come back to Calgary, he and his family. What a great addition back to Calgary. Thank you so much for joining us on Cast Track, and we'll see you next time.